This episode was sponsored by Slate Black Industries. For grips and accessories, visit slateBlackIndustries.com. A stendo with a stendo.
Let's do it, Henry.
We go. Oh no, I need to stendo the stendo with the stendo in it.
What's your initial thought? Are you gonna have flex from the barrel causing dispersion? With
Okay, so a couple things that we're trying to see here. With this barrel, with this 24-inch barrel, we've been seeing, I think it was 3,400 feet per second.
Is it spicy?
Very spicy. I didn't know Austrians cook spicy food, but this obviously does. At 3,400 feet per second. So that's the first thing, because we want to see if we can maintain a point of aim, point of impact as far as we can get, so there's minimal guesswork by using the optic. Number two, is the barrel going to flex? We'll find out.
All right, man. 150.
Ready? Mm-hmm. 150?
150. Impact, dead center. Nice.
Okay, so those were belt buckle hold. It looks like hits dead center on the chest, so maybe I could afford to hold it a little bit higher than belt buckle. Right?
Right. Okay, so at 200, going just slightly up over into the belly-ish area.
Yep.
Just up just a touch.
Yep.
All
Ready?
right, we're there at 2. Impact. That is right edge. Good elevation. Impact.
So speed, we're clocking in at 33:45 right there.
Wow.
So yeah,
Zipping.
33:45. Yep.
Zipping, baby. All right, I'm on at 250.
I'll just center hold it because it looks like it's flexing center to right.
Okay. Dead center. Wow, dude, stacked.
Okay, so
Stack.
yeah, I mean that's not much of a change in elevation so far. Still maintaining the same hold at the sort of like right above the navel belly button area.
And again, these are C zones. They're not full torsos.
Right, correct. So like on an actual torso, I would basically I'm
Just below the
right
xiphoid
here.
process.
right underneath the solar plex.
Yep.
And then it's hitting right here.
Yep.
Center chest.
All right. We're at 3, my dude. We're at 3. You're actually getting pretty close to point of aim, point of impact here.
So I should just point of aim, point of impact at 3?
I would say or maybe just below center.
Okay.
Impact. Center chest, impact was just right of center. Yep, nice. Upper chest. Yeah, so your point of aim is still slightly below the point of impact.
Okay, so let me try to just maintain that point of aim because we have a little bit of drop from here on going out to see how far it drops at 350.
Okay, we're there at 350.
Okay.
Impact, right half, good elevation. You can press left quarter target.
Okay.
Splash off the right, press left, press left half target. I'd be on the left edge based on that. Impact.
Okay. So I feel like this one's probably a little, I need to press it a little higher then, just to get a little bit more plate to work on.
Got it. So you think you're gonna go toward like the neck?
Yeah, shoulder level on the left side.
Yep. All right, I'm there. 400. Impact, left edge, good elevation. Nice. That impact was just left of center.
All right.
Good elevation again.
Yeah, so still, I mean, I'm still targeting somewhere on the torso and hitting the torso area though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're at 450.
Okay, so why don't I maintain that to see how far it drops on this one?
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm there, 450. Impact, just right of center, good elevation, cut it right across the center line. Splash just low right. That was off the left edge. Ease it back, elevation was good on that one. Impact.
All right,
good
so
elevation, left edge impact.
Okay, that was right on top of the head.
Got
so if that's the case,
just gonna give him a hat at 5.
No, I'm actually I'm going for 1 mil elevation at 5.
Okay,
which is absolutely insane.
that is pretty wild. Because what would 5 normally be? About 3 mils?
Yeah, about 3 mils. If I'm using a 200 or 300, 200 meter zero, it would be at 3 mils.
Got it.
Whereas this is like a 300, 350 zero.
Okay, so that makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Impact bottom right quadrant. Impact. Okay.
Nice.
Dude. All right. This thing's a baller. How much are you having to?
Now that's one thing I'm kind of curious.
The audience has no idea what we're talking about. I
okay,
gave Henry
so
hand
normally,
gestures about
okay,
pressure
normally
on the barrel.
When you're firing a machine gun, you have
Tell
to
us, Henry.
load the bipod, meaning that you have to dig the bipod in and press the machine gun forward a little bit.
There you go. Forward. Push the muzzle up farther up. There you go.
What that does, it locks up the bipod and it gives you really good stability. Specifically on the MG3s or MG42 type of machine guns, you really want to lock that bipod in, otherwise it just flops. This also has a floppy bipod, but I'm also shooting not 8mm, not 308. I'm shooting 55
Not
grain
full auto,
ball.
right? Not full auto.
Not
either.
full auto. So there is precedence where Steyr was turning these into DMRs with the AUG HBAR-T. What the T does, it actually relocates the bipod to this area, and it's like a little flip forward bipod, but it supports it where this pistol grip is. Now, typically with RPKs, when you have a bipod mounted on the barrel, typically that affects the accuracy. However, I didn't load the bipod, and frankly, I mean, what did you? I didn't see much of a much of a deviation with the accuracy.
The only wild shot that like didn't make sense was the 450 miss low.
Yeah.
Because the other shots were all like perfectly in line. So that was the only, and generally speaking for the audience, when you're loading up the bipod like that and you're putting pressure on the barrel, we tend to see that materialize in vertical dispersion depending upon the different level of pressure. So that would have been the only one where I saw a round go like in a weird place from a vertical perspective. But what might be interesting is, does the Garmin actually record the string of fire, or is it just one?
Yeah, it does. I could actually.
We could see if it was a standard deviation problem in post-production. Splash just low right. We'll see if there was a velocity problem with that round, where maybe it didn't have as much powder, so it came in low.
Okay.
Or we can check and see if it was maybe had something to do with loading the bipod or pressure on the barrel.
Let me stop this session right now. If you want to, we could continue to see how far we could stretch it.
So the only really other target out there that's visible right now is at 7.
Oh, that's too bad. It's almost like I need a long barrel precision rifle to hit.
I have no idea if I'm going to be able to see it. It's in the tall grass, Henry, and you know what they say about the tall grass. Don't go in.
Yeah.
Don't go in. Do you see the turkey out there on the left?
Yeah, I see the turkey.
All right. Go ahead and give us a shot. I'll see if I can even see the arc on this and where it's flying. And
I'm going to put it on the very base of the ring.
Say that again?
I'll put it on the base of the ring, so I'll give it 3 mils.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, that came in to the right and it came in short. I would give us another target high and press us left another half a target. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be nearly impossible for me to get you on in the grass out there.
Okay.
But I believe that came in on the left and just slightly high, so maybe split the difference on what we just did. Give us, you know, like, what did we say, a half a target higher?
Yeah.
Give us a quarter target. Yeah, windage looked good, but yeah, dude, I can't tell. I'm sorry, it's just the grass is it's high grass in front of it and behind it, and it's all wavy in the wind, so I can't tell.
Okay, so, all right, we couldn't spot it, but why don't I put some fire down on the 500?
Okay, let me get resituated here. All right, I'm on at 5. Fire on ready. Impact low right corner. Low belly. Impact dead center. Low right. Short. These are in the belly. Gotta give it just a little bit more.
I mean, I heard at least that last one.
There were many tanks.
Huh?
There were many tanks.
Many tanks?
There were many tanks, yes.
Oh, cool.
There were a couple non-tanks, but there were many tanks.
So what I'll do next, I'll actually load the bipod a little bit more. This is not a great surface to load the bipod, but still I'll do my best to load it. And I'll use a shorter mag and drop it a little lower so I get a better center of gravity. We'll see if we can put some suppressive fire on the 300-yard target. I mean...
Oh, you're going to suppressive fire.
Suppress it, yeah. We're going to suppress it. We're going to keep its head down.
Okay. Yeah, nice. The first few came in just high, and then you were able to get it all like very much centered up right back on.
I think too, like once I got a little bit farther behind it and lowered it in the little pocket of my shoulder, it was able to return straight back into the target a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely different from shooting a machine gun though. Like when you're shooting a machine gun, you're certainly not looking at the crosshair. This is a really interesting, weird hybrid experience shooting a semi-auto LMG barrel HBAR in the front, but still 300 yards. That was fairly effective on, I would say, suppressive fire. Like
that wasn't just suppressive fire. I mean, that was effective fire on a sub torso.
Yeah. So on that note, we definitely gave you guys more than 40.
Money's worth in this video. Yeah.
A little bit more shooting for your enjoyment, but shall we take it to the debrief?
Let's do it.
We'll see you guys at the debrief.
Now before we go any further, a quick word from this video sponsor and title sponsor of the show, Midway USA. Here at 9-Hole, you see us shoot a variety of firearms. We use various optics from red dots to 25 power precision scopes. We shoot various ammunition from ball to match to hand loads. We shoot off of various mats and rests, we transport our firearms in a whole bunch of different cases, and we maintain our firearms with a variety of cleaning supplies. But we can find all of this at Midway USA. Midway carries just about everything for serious shooters. But the product offering isn't the only reason we choose Midway. If you need an order shipped quick, Midway's shipping department is probably one of the best in the business. Almost all the orders we place there ship the same or the next business day. And lastly, something I personally love, the stock availability feature. Not only can you see if a product is in stock and available to ship, but you can also see when back ordered or out of stock items are expected to be available again. This lets us know it's safe to order a back-ordered product and that we won't get stuck waiting for months for it to come back into stock. So, if you're looking to pick up some new gear, be sure to check out Midway USA. Now, let's get back to the show. Welcome into the debrief. For Henry, it's always a good day when there's a bullpup on the range, okay? Oh. Especially when it is an HBAR style barrel bullpup that's the size, right? The size of an M4, but ripping rounds effectively over that of, in terms of velocity, over that of an M16 length gun. Absolutely wild. What was the velocities you were clocking on these? Like 3,400 feet per second?
Yes. So essentially, we gamed this a little bit with the max point blank range. This is a fancy talk for like what's your zero range to have the least amount of variation for elevation. I had 1 MOA or 1 mil of holdover for the 500 yard target with a 300 meter zero. Imagine that. So essentially what that means for people is if you have a belt buckle hold or a belly hold, that one hold brings you out to 500.
So walk us through that, Henry, in case people aren't following. So basically you're holding low of center at the belly button area, or in our case, it's like the lower quadrant of the plate, right? Or at the bottom edge of the plate even. 150, 200, 250, 300 gradually coming up to 300 being a dead-on hold. And then going upper chest 350, sort of neck area 400, headshot 450, and hat at 500, right?
Yeah,
is that effectively what you were doing?
Yes, if you're looking for point targets. But if you're looking for fire support, the big thing that you want to do is like when you're in that lizard brain mode, you just want to find a place to put that crosshair and squeeze the trigger. That's it. That's all you're trying to do to drop rounds into that vicinity.
So by running a 300 yard zero with this type of velocity, with only basically like a mil's worth of drop at 500, it really isn't a hat hold then at 500, right? Because that would be if it were a full size torso.
Right.
For our, miniaturized versions, it might be right over his head, but that's really still like just basically put the crosshair on the target
and squeeze.
And start pressing the trigger.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
Because your goal right here isn't like, oh, I just want one shot to take someone down. No, you're trying to pin someone down with this fire. And so you're trying to go fast because as it's recoiling, as it's coming back, you're trying to get back on target, get back on target, back on target. I mean, it works better on automatic, obviously. Also, the Austrian layout of the Sturmgewehr A1 mod, which is the A3SF A2, the upgraded Gen 2 version to include the Steyr cartridge deflector. This is the original Austrian layout, with an exception of this using the older pistol grip. The newer one has a slot of pick rail up here. We'll talk about the utility of that in a bit. And this is just with the front end switched out for the HBAR. That's really it. If it comes to it, you can even pop up to your red dot and roll with non-magnified red dot. And what's really cool about this is how easy it is to interchange the barrel, because it's not like this is an entirely different system. A la, like, I don't know, a la SAW, right? SAW versus M4, right? It's not like it's a totally different system. It's literally just a barrel swap, right? So this is a really good point for us to jump back into the Austrian doctrinal side. How did this come about with Steyr making this thing with interchangeable barrels, right? A lot of it comes down to, or rather not interchangeable barrels, so why did they come up with a barrel with a bipod affixed to it that ran 42-round magazines? Specifically, it's because if you're looking at the Austrian conscript type of service, so everyone serves, it's a neutral country, you have to have as many people with rifles in the same clothing item there in case of something happening that a neighbor tries to take over your country and conscript your people to fight foreign wars. What would you do? Right? How would you quickly arm those people? First of all, like Switzerland, they run a similar doctrine, and they want to have their rifles fully manufactured in Austria to include the sighting solution. And that insulates them from using any external manufacturing capacity to hinder
It's a maximization of logistics, right? Now, you can be completely self-sufficient in the creation of your small arm.
Right.
Okay.
And let's put that to a second level effect. Now, their soldiers use a variant of the MG3 general purpose machine gun, which is a derivation of the MG42 that they may or may not have used in a past life. That said, the idea of an HBAR is then you can manufacture these barrels, and by taking just the barrel off, you can issue just this part to your troops. And all of a sudden, if you have 5 of these to issue within a platoon, you have 5 substitute automatic riflemen. Specifically, I'm not saying machine gunner, but automatic rifleman, because then you hit them up also with a longer stendo mags, and you've got 42 rounds on the progressive trigger to drop machine gun fire if you need to. And for the cost versus the cost versus what you get is phenomenal, because you're using the same platforms. You're not switching any of these general issue rifles out, but you're getting more out of the rifle. And on top of that, if you burn a machine gun barrel because of that, okay, get a new one.
Yeah, just throw in a new one, right? Yeah.
Yep. But what people typically don't really look at is they look at the HBAR AUG and they think, oh, that's a machine gun. That's an automatic rifleman. What we started looking at was, that's a 24-inch barrel. How fast does that projectile go? And this was a perfect time for us to show that little Garmin that we got from Midway earlier. We bought it, that is. And see that, to our shock, this thing was turning regular 55 grain ball into railgun projectiles.
It's basically the equivalent of the old school, like, DPMS varminter barrels, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, I think it's better, because, like...
Well, I'm thinking in terms of the length of the barrel, that's the closest thing we have in the AR world. But even those, like, to your point, I don't remember necessarily being able to clock those at that type of velocity. Maybe it's because we were shooting 223 out of those back in the day. And not 5.56.
Now, that's another point. These are 1.9 twist, a la every Austrian issued thing. So it is using the older twist. So you are locked into using older types of ammunition. That said, 700, we did place shots on target. Now, we didn't notice at the time because 55 grain projectile, 55. Even though it was going really fast, we didn't realize that it was actually hitting until afterwards I was doing post-production, right? And even Steve, when he was looking at some of the footage with me, he didn't even notice at first. I was pointing it out. I was like, that target is slightly rocking. And that's a clear impact when we saw it afterwards. So the first shot at the 700 was off. Clearly, it was off. You were able to spot the trace and place me onto the correct windage. But then the second shot, it just wasn't hitting the it wasn't moving the stiff target. But that was a good win call. That was a good adjustment call. So imagine, right? Like that same platoon we were talking about. You drop 5 of these barrels with 5, sets of magazines that have stendos on them onto that platoon. All of a sudden, each squad, plus a squad has a +1, has not only automatic rifleman capability, but potentially you could take your ball ammunition and juice it up and shoot it at longer distances.
Yeah, it's like a combination between, basically because we don't have the full auto variant of this. It wasn't a automatic rifleman for us. It was ultimately we were going to see, could we use this like it was a sort of designated marksman role or an SPR style role? Well, and I think the answer is yes.
Like very yes.
I would say, the more we explore the show and we see what is and isn't feasible and how possible distances with different setups. All too often, I see people commenting about how like 700 is really easy for 5.56.
With 77 grains.
Right, that may be true when you're looking at maximizing the capabilities. Like you're shooting 77s, you don't have a high wind day, or the wind is very consistent. And yeah, in certain instances like that, yeah, you can definitely get repeatable hits. But what we know is that under a variety of conditions, when we try to do that with 55 ball, like just the loose pack ball ammunition, I would not say that it's easily repeatable stuff in wind. Mm-hmm. But when you start looking at this configuration where, again, you're shooting a 24-inch barrel, it does not feel like a 24-inch barrel. Like this feels like, again, more of an SPR style configuration than it does like the old Varminter style configuration, right? It still feels wieldable. It still feels like something you could move and operate with in terms of like in confined spaces and whatnot. Not optimally, but it still feels like you could do it.
I mean, better than an SPR, I would say.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if we're saying we could do it with a precision, sort of like precision gasser 5.56 gun, with like a 14.5-inch barrel with a suppressor, or with like a 16 or an 18-inch barrel, especially with a can, like, yeah, this is definitely still doable. Like easily still doable in that role, where I don't think you could say the same thing with the 24-inch Varminter setup on an AR. Yeah. Like it's not the same. And we're able to utilize the velocity that this barrel is pushing to basically overcome some of the issues with the standard M193 round, which is that it just loses its butt as it goes out there pretty rapidly.
So let's talk about like this how this kind of ties into our current deployment kit concept of packing two uppers, right? I typically have this in two barrels. One is the 14.5 perm muzzle device barrel, which puts it this long, which is like an MP5 length when you're running around with it. I took the light off of the side rail. This is an aftermarket rail from Silver Shooting Sports. But typically, I would then have the like a light on the side. And then if I wanted to, I just clip this barrel on if I wanted a little bit more juice to punch out. Now, the downside, unlike the AR-15s, like you could slave your optic to the barrel swap, where you can't do with this. That being said, if you want to melt body armor with ball ammunition, this bad boy is your baby.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point, Henry. I know one of the things that maybe not everybody knows what the deployment kit sort of strategy is. So let's just go into it for 2 seconds.
Sure.
I think it makes sense to cover it. Basically, what Henry and I have sort of settled on as an optimum configuration, because obviously we're doing the 9-hole show. We have tons of different firearms for use on the show, for collectability reasons, all the rest. But if we really had to boil down our setups or our configurations for real use, what would make most sense? And we've had this debate amongst ourselves, and it really comes down to an AR with a shorter upper and a longer upper. And that shorter upper could be an 11.5, it could be a 12.5, it could be a 14.5. But then my longer upper would grow accordingly. So if I'm on a 10.5-inch shorty, I might be on a 14.5-inch like longer upper, and that might stagger out to say an 18-inch SPR style configuration. The idea being you can swap out the uppers. That's going to change out your enablers and your front end configurations to be optimized for whatever role you ultimately need. And between those two different uppers, you're probably going to be able to cover 99% of what you could ever need to be doing with them. And that's sort of the idea that we've approached. You know, off of a single lower, you can kind of, as a consumer, you cannot spend insane amounts of money on a bunch of different guns, and you can sort of have a total capability in one package that fits in one case that can rock and roll with you. I mean, did I leave anything out there?
Yeah, except you tied it saying it must be an AR-15, whereas Joshua, excuse me.
Look, I said our ideal. Okay, fine. My ideal. All right. But the idea here would be same with a couple adjustments. It being predominantly the main thing you'd be swapping is the barrel. You already referenced that you're not necessarily changing out your enablers or your optic. So you have to make some adjustments maybe on the fly with those devices. But it's a similar concept,
yes.
and it's scalable to an entire population. In fact, even if you want to pull it back into the idea of a purely U.S. CONUS sort of like civilian perspective, if you're working with a group of people and you want varied capability, like these are some of the things that allow you to achieve that type of varied capability, even within a small group of individuals, where you can easily flex into one role or another.
Right, and that's essentially what I'm talking about. Like back in the 70s and the 80s, the Austrian already came out with their solution to substitute fire support as they needed at a very economical scale. I mean, these barrels are not cheap compared to AR-15 barrels, but for what you get, the QD, the quick employment of it, and the performance that you get, this run shocked me. Like, I thought it was going to do fine, but especially when we started pressing on, like, multiple hits on targets, you know, like, after we cleared the course, and we're just jamming rounds downrange. Man, that is scary watching the 3 and the 5 just essentially
cranked.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, and I want to bring this up before we go into that, because I think that will have some implications to talk about how the barrel is set up with a bipod. One of the pieces that was interesting is when we were shooting, you had that miss at 450 that was kind of like, because you had a hit, and then you had a miss that was like, wow, that was not a great shot. But we went back in the with the chronograph, with that Garmin, and you were able to identify that you actually lost, like, what was it, like almost 50 feet per second on that round?
Yeah, it was really weird. Like, we've never had this capability to where, like, real time we're able to see and analyze, you know, what was the feet per second for that particular shot. And again, this is bulk packaged ammunition. This is not match grade ammunition.
No.
And we saw that particular round was around 46, 47 feet per second slower than the mean of other cartridges. And the previous round right before that was actually a higher velocity than the mean. So you're talking about the delta between the two was more than 50 feet per second. And
that's why the standard deviation, and when you start looking at that, is such an important factor to consider.
Right.
When you're looking at your ammo, especially if you're looking at it from a precision perspective, right?
Yep. But if we're looking, I mean, we kind of, one thing we did on a disservice on this is we haven't talked about sort of the historical employment of this in militaries, because this is not a common look when you look for AUGs. And in fact, these LMG barrels used to be upwards in the 3,000 range on the street market price.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a recent recreation that Steyr USA made that's at the 900-ish, I believe, mark. Still not cheap, but remember, this whole thing is a Steyr blank that they use to make this. And it has a gas tube and bipod included. So it's more than just a barrel. The interesting thing is, in the past, obviously the initial primary employment of this was to substitute the automatic rifleman role. We've seen that in photos, even Austrians evaluating it. Ultimately, it was not commonly used in the Austrian military, but it still existed in the Steyr catalog. And the interesting thing about this is they started, especially with the A2s, they had flat tops that had a slightly raised rail section. They started using telescopic optics on them. And so they started developing what became the HBAR-T, so the heavy barrel hyphen T as in telescope. And that was a lot of only Steyr nerds probably know this, but that was a very, that was shown actually on one of the 1980s catalogs, I believe, but nobody really gave that a lot of thought because your bipod's mounted on the barrel. Like, everybody just looks at that and says, this is ridiculous. The Peruvians are some of the only people I know of who actually took that concept seriously. And you'll see that they have an HBAR-T that's different, where their bipod is actually mounted right here near the gas block. Now, this, as close to the A3SF Gen 2 as it is, it's lacking one component that I don't have. There's a pick rail section that goes right here. That extends a little bit, and then their vert grip is a vert grip that attaches to the pick rail. And so this accessory rail allows them to use really more so lights and stuff, not bipods. But that opens the conversation on us using a traditional HBAR barrel, and what if we had one without the bipod attached, and then substituted the bipod with a true SF Gen 2, and had that pick rail section right up here, and used a bipod down there instead. You lose all the interference on the barrel, which I had to be cognizant about when we were shooting it. And especially when I think this was your theory, that when I was firing at the close close succession stuff at the 500, a lot of them, you said they were hitting high and then low and high and low, right?
The 300, when you were really I think, again, our brains, you go lizard brain on it, right? And it's like, I need to go fast here, so I'm going to control the recoil. Mm-hmm. Whereas on the slow fire, you were more relaxed and you were cognitively remembering not to load into the bipod. And so you were just sort of resting on it for most of the shooting. But on the rapid fire up close, you're like, I'm going to rip on this. And so you implicitly, you're digging into the gun and pressing and loading into the bipod. Right. And all your rounds were up at the head level. Yeah. All of them were. Even the misses were right over the head or right around the head. And then all your impacts were in the face or in the neck area. Or again, these are C zones, so they're smaller than an actual torso, but it's that's where they were landing on the plate. Yeah, it goes back to what I was trained on with belt feds, and loading bipods. You dig it and you jam it. I was trying not to do that, but still, I think there was a little bit. That said, let's reference this back to what I was saying, a belly hold for this particular rifle, though. I think when you're running this type of thing with a barrel-mounted bipod, specifically for something like this, if you're really trying to run support fire, I would just do belly hold and just dress off of that, which is, we saw success towards the end whenever we were running that. And then it's also important to reference, Henry, we really haven't done any AR style, automatic rifle style configurations on this course, with the exception of one or two, and they did not go well. Yeah. The biggest one I can think of was what? It was the RPK.
We didn't even publish that one.
Right, it's never come to light because we needed to probably do more work on it, because what we noticed is that there was such massive deflection when running it with the bipod deployed, putting pressure on the barrel, that the rounds weren't even on that one. We couldn't even hit stuff up close with it. There was so much deflection going on, which this did not have that. It had what appeared to be a more predictable, the rounds are going to come in a bit higher because you're pressing down and the barrel would be getting the nose raised. It makes sense.
That's the biggest thing to it. This one's predictable. Yes, during the actual step out, I think some of them was me actually putting a little bit of pressure on it. So you see a little bit of left and right. I was conscious about the up and down, but I think you still see a little bit of left and right, and that may be me pressing up on it a little bit. Sure. Unlike belt feds that I've run in the past, it's just a different way of shooting it. You're dressing off of bursts, you're dressing off of group size, like, you know, an area target.
Area fire, right? Yeah.
And then you're just working off of that with belt feds. Whereas this, you're using something that in your mind tells you is a belt fed, but you're shooting it as a semi-auto DMR, and strangely enough, it freaking works.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, the fact that we were able to get you on at 700 within 2 shots. Granted, God, that stunk because I wish I could have called them better. But with the Mirage, with the wavy grass, with 55 grains, with the target basically having no report, it's just so hard to call those out at that distance on certain days. But we were able to get rounds on target at 700 within 1 correction. Like, that's pretty sick because this is also not like a precision optic either, right? Like, that's what people have to remember. This is not a precision optic.
It's bomb-proof, but it's not precision.
Right. You don't have the magnification. You don't have the holdover at the same level or degree that you have on precision scopes.
Yeah.
And so when we look at all of this combined, it's like, this is a really impressive bit of kit. And in my mind, I'm like, I want to see this configuration with that bipod off the barrel and on a rail system beneath it, because I think that one adjustment would be a major adjustment in the positive direction. And now, as far as you've shared, as I understand it, that's what's being done going forward.
You notice there's been some improvements on the next generation. Now, this is the sacrilege of NATO mags. Yes, that's true. But we're looking at the next generation. Now, this is a 20-inch barrel on this particular, let's see, A3M2. This is the M2. So this is the next generation past that. But Steyr did something really interesting by removing this little portion. You have full access to the barrel, so you could still switch the barrel real quick. And again, for those who don't know, this is actually the next generation for the Steyr A3, the Steyr AUG A3 model, for it to progress. And so it's really interesting. Initially, I was looking at, you know, what if we had the actual SF model A2 under rail, but now for us to test stuff like that, we could just drop it onto the M2 and test it.
Very cool.
And we'll find out for you guys.
Well, with that said, it's a perfect spot to wrap up, and thank those of you who stick around to the end of these sessions. Do all the good YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, check us out on Patreon, hop into the private Discord, and check us out on Histories of Weapons and War. Until next time, we'll see you on the range.
This is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this